What if you could grow your own fuel? Instead of powering a car with gasoline, would a bushel of corn do the trick? It's all possible. Here at Wyoming Ethanol in Torrington, Wyoming, they make 5 million gallons of fuel alcohol every year. Let's see how they do it.
This is the Wyoming Ethanol plant. Because they use a lot of corn, it's not surprising that they're located in a prime agricultural area near the Wyoming-Nebraska border. Here they make alcohol for fuel. That fuel is called ethanol. To make ethanol, corn, enzymes, yeast, and water are added together in a fermentation process. Once the fermentation is complete, the leftover solids and water are removed, leaving 100% ethanol. Most ethanol is sold to gasoline manufacturers, where it's blended with fuel you buy at the gas pump. Ethanol helps cut down engine emissions and pollution by helping add more oxygen to the fuel. More oxygen helps gasoline burn more completely. At the gas pump, up to 10% of the fuel can consist of ethanol. Engine modifications are needed if higher concentrations of ethanol are used. However, with those modifications, some cars can run on pure ethanol. To promote the use of ethanol as a fuel, several drag racing cars are sponsored by Wyoming Ethanol, and 2 of their cars run on 100% ethanol fuel. Dan Schwarzkopf explains the advantages of pure alcohol as a racing fuel.
We pick up a little bit more power because you use a little bit more of it than what you would gasoline. So we found that the ethanol versus gasoline runs a lot cooler. You're able to use a little bit more of it. The BTUs is equivalent because of the amount that you use on a gallon-to-gallon usage basis. If you were using 1 gallon of race gasoline, you'd use 1.5 gallons of fuel ethanol. The fuel ethanol has 117 octane rating, so the ethanol has definitely been a big gain over the gasoline.
So how is ethanol made? For one, it takes some basic math.
The trucks will come in and dump their grain here, and it goes into the bottom of this big bucket elevator. So we can pick any bin that we want that grain to go into. Once it goes into the bin, we pull out from the bottom, and it goes into our incline auger into our hopper. The corn will go over a great big holed screen in there, and the trash will stay on top and gets moved out, and the grain falls through the bottom and goes straight onto our hammer mill directly behind the hopper. And it just pulverizes the grain against the screens, and it turns it into flour.
Okay.
Some water is added to flour, and the mixture cooked to break starch out of the flour. Then enzymes are added, beginning a conversion process that changes starch to simple sugars. Then it's on to the fermenters.
We have a recipe with yeast waiting for it to come in so the yeast can work on the simple sugars that we took so that we can produce alcohol. When fermentation is done inside the fermenters, it is a beer. It is based on from 11 to 12% alcohol. We have 12 25,000 gallon fermenters, and we approximately run about 60 gallons per minute through each fermenter to fill, 6 to 7 hours to fill. The actual finished process that's going on now for about the first 12 to 18 hours of scarification. It's total conversion from starch to sugars so that the yeast can work on the simple sugars. Our next step is, Roger, when we bring the beer out from the fermenter, once it's totally converted, we bring it out to our beer well. What we do is try flashing the alcohol out, and we produce 190 proof with our distillation column. Once we make the 190 proof, we put it to a holding tank, and then we have a pump system that we run it through a superheater and then through our dehydration unit, which are our molecular sieves. We break out the last 5% of water of the 190 proof to turn it to 200 proof. This is where our finished product is. After we had been shipping or producing ethanol for 24 hours, it is denatured up in our 200 bulk tank, and then it's shipped out here to our tank farm before we ship it out by truck.
This plant produces about 5 million gallons of ethanol each year for sale, mostly to gasoline manufacturers.
An interesting fact about this ethanol plant is that there's very little waste. Solids that are left over from the distillation process are rich in nutrients and sold as cattle feed. And some liquid mix is also blended into feed mixtures for large feedlot operations. The chemistry at Wyoming Ethanol may be complex, but the math is pretty straightforward and easy. But you have to be accurate, because in the real world, mistakes can cost your company money.